Hello, everybody. Welcome to this press conference of the Global Forest Coalition and the Biomass Action Network. I am a coordinator of the Biomass Action Network, which is a global alliance of many NGOs across 70 countries. Brazil is focusing on making a big splash at COP30 about promoting the transition to a bioeconomy. Undoubtedly, there are some positive elements of the bioeconomy, but it's not an undifferentiated good thing. At the small local level, at a small scale, it can be sustainable and useful, but we need to beware, because it can also be a gateway to extremely damaging bioenergy. Here, we're focused on a major element of that, which is large-scale industrial use of forest biomass energy. This involves substituting wood for coal in large centralised energy generators. It is alleged to be a climate measure, but actually is more emissive than burning coal, and has a range of other destructive impacts on communities, on the biosphere, and on the climate. So we're going to go through those now with the speakers that we have assembled. I might add to start off with that the Climate Action Network recognised this threat to the bioeconomy and coming into this Bonn meeting have produced a position on bioenergy and a 2-page information sheet which will become available sometime today, we hope, in a handout form. So it's not just us raising this concern, the entire Climate Action Network is also seriously worried about this. The first speaker is Kwami Kponzo from the Global Forest Coalition, and who is also coordinator of the Biomass Action Network Africa, regarding impacts on the ground in the Global South of big biomass.
Thank you. Thank you, Moderator. The biomass energy production has huge impact on forests, biodiversity, and local communities and indigenous people. Large quantity energy production from biomass require hands, land, and water, two important natural resources for people, especially indigenous people and local communities. In the Global South, most biomass developments are synonymous with monoculture tree plantations using exotic species such as eucalyptus, which has implication on biodiversity, water, and surrounding communities' livelihoods. Communities are facing land grabbing, experiencing unwanted displacement, and are constantly being restricted to their own territories where they see their primary forests destroyed. The case of Uganda with green resources plantations is a reference. In Mozambique, for example, the Portucel group has at its disposal a total area of approximately 360,000 hectares, on which it has already thousands of hectares of commercial eucalyptus plantations. These are part of a project that includes the construction of a new biomass power station, in addition to their plan of having new pulp mill station. So the group has destroyed local farmers' houses and farmlands under the pretext of having been granted the land by the Council of Ministers of Mozambique. So the expansion of large-scale biomass as renewable energy driven by the climate and energy-related finance under Paris Agreement Article 2.1 has to stop because it has huge impacts on communities and nature. So the climate finance is often include mitigation, which drives harmful projects that impacts communities. So the large-scale bioeconomy is not for people, it's not for the nature. So we had enough of the capitalist way of development. So we want peace for communities, peace with nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwami. And I might add as we pass on to the next speaker, that in Indonesia, a government mandate to co-fire coal with with woody biomass is leading to land grabbing all over the country without the knowledge often of the traditional owners of that forest, let alone any free, prior and informed consent. And it is slated to, at its worst, affect between 2 and 10 million hectares of natural forest and go to large-scale conversion to plantation. I'm now going to pass to our next speaker because we need to understand that in this, in the big biomass industry, there are impacts all throughout the supply chain, not just on the ground in the forest where it's bad enough. Our next speaker is Katherine Egland. She is from EEECHO, which is based in the environmental justice communities of the US South. And as I say, there's an important focus moving further up the supply chain to the processing of wood pellets.
While the intent for parties to transition may be admirable, energy profiteers have taken advantage of this frantic race against time to reach 1.5C. Their claim that shifting to the use of wood bioenergy is clean, safe, and renewable is a clean, safe, and renewable alternative is false, blatantly misleading, and terribly misguided. Yes, trees can be replanted, but cannot grow at a rate fast enough to account for the carbon loss from the cutting and burning of mature trees. While it seems plausible, the use of wood bioenergy is a deceptively, dangerously flawed technology that will further deteriorate our planet while literally suffocating the lives of people in living proximity of the facilities where the wood pellets are manufactured. The countries that's the no-show here at Bonn, the United States, is the largest exporter of wood pellets. For the most part, wood pellets industries disproportionately select sites to locate their industrial plants in the southeastern areas of the U.S. These are the communities with the highest percentage of Black populations. They are also the poorest communities in our nation and the ones that also suffer greater climate impacts. After cutting the trees and processing them into pellets and leaving vulnerable communities stricken with disease from breathing the lethal toxic cocktails of chemicals, the pellets are then shipped from the United States to other countries around the world to be burned for energy. The wood pellets manufacturing process emits excessive amounts of deadly pollutants, including particulates, volatile organic compounds, nitrogen oxide, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, methanol, acrolein, and formaldehyde. Southeastern U.S. residents exposed to these carcinogens are exhibiting many serious health effects from exposure to these chemicals. These have been shown to lead to respiratory illnesses, heart disease, premature death, low birth rate, type 2 diabetes, strokes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and lung, kidney, and bladder cancer. Clearing the forest has also left these communities to contend with water contamination and exacerbated flooding. We must not allow people in one country to suffer so that the parties of another country claim credit for lowering their emissions on their NDCs. And in actuality, the emissions aren't even lowered. They're just not being properly accounted. We should be careful of embracing bioeconomies or any concept that violates human rights. We must adhere to the principles of a just transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kathy. So important to understand that, and to understand that routinely the companies that manufacture wood pellets in these areas breach the environmental conditions which are poor in the first place. 11,000 breaches in one study, happening over a not very long period. Next speaker is Ruairi Brogan. He's representing the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, which is an affiliate of BirdLife International. And Ruairi will be speaking on the climate and biodiversity impacts of the forest biomass industry and the global north. Thanks, Ruairi.
Thank you, Peg. Over the past few days, we've seen unprecedented momentum building to address the twin climate and biodiversity crises together, recognising that they're so intertwined that if we fail on one, we fail on both. As these discussions begin to look towards Belém, the COP30 presidency prepares to make the global bioeconomy one of its main priorities. This will be based on principles established last year at the G20 summit in Brazil. They commit to contributing to the conservation of biodiversity and promoting the restoration and regeneration of degraded areas and ecosystems through sustainable projects. Whilst there is a lot of good in these principles, it is essential that in practice we challenge the extraction of more natural resources to meet climate commitments. Extreme care is needed to ensure that the bioeconomy does not become a gateway to harmful bioenergy practice. Large-scale bioenergy companies operating in the UK that source their wood mostly from the North America, such as the US Southeast, as Ms. Kathy mentioned, they use forest biomass that often contains far more substantial wood than just residues and waste, including whole trees. A recent investigation found that Drax Power Station was sourcing timber from old-growth forests in Canada, taking 40,000 tonnes in 2023. And if we look to Estonia, there are numerous examples of Valgapuu, a leading forestry company, clear-cutting forests on Natura 2000 sites, especially protected areas for nature. This industrial activity also causes ecosystem degradation, which in turn leads to the erosion of our valuable carbon stores. In fact, in Europe, the European Scientific Advisory Board on Climate Change recently highlighted that Europe's forest carbon sinks are shrinking rapidly, and in some cases becoming sources, noting that bioenergy is a major contributor to this. When coupled with hotter, drier weather, forest degradation creates dangerous conditions for wildfires to rage and further harm these vital ecosystems and wildlife, and releasing more carbon into the atmosphere. Halting drivers of deforestation and degradation and protecting and restoring our precious forests will be the most effective way to store carbon, save biodiversity, and improve our ability to withstand harmful wildfires in a warming world. We are therefore calling for countries and corporations to help put the fires out, exclude harmful woody biomass from their bioeconomy plans, and immediately revise their plans and targets, and eliminate their reliance on this dangerous distraction, including in their NDCs. The resulting gap must be filled by environmentally and socially appropriate renewable energy, forest protection and restoration, and reducing overconsumption. We can't burn our way out of the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruairi. So I think it's important to understand that there are some major consuming centres at the moment for biomass energy, which are drawing from all over the planet and beginning to plunder the forests of the world. And if this expands further, as proposed under, for example, an expansion of the renewable energy target, a 3 times expansion will mean, according to the International Energy Agency, 13 times more monoculture plantations established by 2030, if that was even possible. So we're looking at something that is quite almost impossible to imagine. Obviously, we need a 3 times expansion in the renewable energy target, but not to have woody biomass in there. The consuming centres at the moment are Japan, South Korea, Europe, and the UK, but it's spreading now around the world. Europe relies for 60% of its renewable energy on bioenergy. People think it's wind and solar, but actually that is a much smaller share. And of bioenergy, solid biomass, wood biomass, is by far the largest proportion. So we're saying move away from it, but what else could be done? Our next speaker is Toby Aykroyd from the Wild Europe Foundation, and he will speak about the alternatives that give us much better economic and environmental outcomes, alternatives for Europe. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. Very simple fact that forest bioenergy emits higher carbon dioxide equivalents adjusted for life cycle than the fossil fuels it is meant to replace, even coal. It's simple, it gets around the complexities of abusing carbon accounting, and you would think as a basic irremutable fact of physics, it would bring the entire forest bioenergy campaign to a grinding stop. Far from it, as my colleagues have just emphasized so well, it's expanding rapidly. If bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, BECCS, proceeds, as is currently apparently planned, you will be looking by 2050 in Europe alone at between 35 and 40 billion euro per annum in subsidies. That's a catastrophic increase for climate change, for biodiversity destruction, for local community health, but also for the economy. And this is one aspect that we're trying to introduce into a campaign that is otherwise, frankly, at the moment being lost. Despite the high articulacy of all the arguments you've heard this morning, it is being lost, and lost for the worst possible of reasons, heavily applied pressure with a lot of lobbying money behind it. So what we have been trying to do is to look at what alternatives there are and how to express the benefits of these in economic terms to decision takers who listen to economic arguments even though they've repeatedly proven deaf to environmental or health approaches. And basically we're saying, let's take these subsidies, gear them up in financial terms to incentivize third-party matched funding, and apply them to effective, proven means of tackling climate change, not these false solutions. So 3 basic categories: genuine renewables, solar, wind, heat pumps, geothermal, what have you, together with improved infrastructure. That's where one of the main bottlenecks is occurring at the moment. Demand suppression enterprises, of which there's a broad range: insulation, recycling, fuel efficiency, individual sectoral decarbonisation, particularly for concrete and steel. And thirdly, investment in carbon-absorbent ecosystems, protection of what's already there, but also really substantial expansion. Put all those together, and by 2050, you have a very different story. Not only are you reaching your Paris Agreement targets far faster and more convincingly, and you're talking up to 25% of the emission reduction required by those targets, you're also producing some pretty striking economic outcomes. By 2050, around an annual increase in gross value added of about 95 billion, cost savings of around 40 billion, these are annual figures, and higher tech, much higher tech jobs, at least 1.8 million, And then you've got the economic multiplier impacts that would actually add up quite considerably to a wider impact in economic terms. We're talking Europe, but this is applicable on a global basis, and a really important message to take to Brazil as a developing economy, as it's making up its mind on the various routes ahead. And these economic benefits, together with the environmental ones, they're not meant to replace them, they're meant to support and enhance them, have a number of really clear messages. Firstly, they enable us to engage with key audiences. Who are the real decision takers? Not just the people that we have the time and resource to approach. There are an entire network of organizations out there that we don't have the capacity to reach until we unlock those economic arguments. Whether it's the European Investment Bank in Luxembourg or the minister in the UK who is about to decide which way to play his cards on adoption of BECS. It's the same process. Same process with the competitiveness agenda that's now all the rage in Brussels and Strasbourg with the rightward drift in politics. We can not only have to confront that head on, we can use it for our own arguments and strengthen them thereby. And there is one, I think, really important message just to end on here, again in economic terms, that if you take agriculture, forestry, the forest bioenergy sector, put them all together, you have between 3.5%, conceivably 4% of gross domestic product in Europe. The other 96% of the economy, 96% pays twice over. Firstly, for those outrageously large subsidies and the diversion of capital that they imply. And secondly, for the climate change impacts that we're seeing around us, which have very real and very economic costs. So a long way to go, all the arguments to run through again, but some good initial reactions and a report that we've just produced through Trinomics, which is the energy advisor to the European Commission, backing all those statistics. I'd be very happy to get any feedback from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. Well, that concludes our presentations. I think we've got time to take a question or two before we move on to the next conference. I can see a question over here.
Hello, I'm Alistair Thompson from Scoop Media, New Zealand. This issue has been live now for many years. And I mean, I remember seeing a documentary maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago about Drax and about the wholesale destruction of American forests and exporting of wood pellets, particularly to Germany and for wood-fired electricity generation. I mean, there is a sophistry in the idea of I mean, it's a deliberate corruption and manipulation of rules established by the COP itself, guidelines which we're experiencing here. What's the solution to that? I mean, is it possible for the COP to change this and undermine this, or are we looking at a situation where the power of the lobbyists who are supporting this activity inside the COP means that it's difficult for us to actually change the rules for something that we know which is wrong? Secondly, in relation to eucalyptus in Africa, I mean, this is a native plant of Australia, which is flammable. I mean, its entire life cycle is about being on fire. It's completely insane for it to be being used in Africa, unless you want to have as many fires as you can possibly have.
Thank you. I might start on this one because I have followed the development of the land use change and forestry rules closely and was involved in advocating around the ones that we've ended up with. And I can tell you that the forest industry had their fingerprints all over it when the rules for forest management carbon accounting were developed for the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol, which are basically the rules under which this has flourished. The problem is that unlike the accounting for the carbon emissions of fossil fuels, when biomass energy is burnt to produce energy in the energy sector, zero emissions are shown in the energy sector, whereas you see the emissions for oil, coal and gas. It's not that there aren't any emissions, they are substantial, in fact more so usually than the emissions from coal, but the idea is that somehow they should be taken back to the land sector and accounted for where the biomass was produced. So there's already a perverse incentive, because how many decision makers know all the ins and outs of that? Not many. They just see a zero and think it means zero. The second thing is we're having this biomass transported around the world. So it is the country that produced the wood that is responsible for the emissions that actually occur in another country that is claiming to have reduced its own emissions. As these trades start to take place increasingly from the global south to the global north, where the wood will be burnt, it is the countries of the global south that will be responsible for the emissions that the global north fails to account for. So there's a whole element of climate colonialism in here. It has to be reformed at the UNFCCC. We need the IPCC to get onto it. We already have a paper from IPCC scientists saying we made a mistake when we developed these rules. We didn't know it would spawn this industry. Something has to be done. But there are big corporate interests and countries reliant on the situation who don't want to move. So we really have to have a big push. You might hear from my accent that I come from Australia. I live very close to the place where the type specimen of the eucalypt that is being promulgated around the world comes from, and I apologise. It's beautiful at home, it's dreadful everywhere else. And to bring this flammability to the other places in the world and to ecosystems in the world where it will spread at a time when climate change is already exacerbating fire is actually an environmental crime, and it has to be called out. I don't know if we've got time for anyone else, or if I've just finished. I think we're over, yeah. Oh, here, people who want it, we have got, hooray, the short briefs for this topic from Cairns. So I'll be down here with them as we clear away for the next press conference.